PCA, and they do some great work in trying to make sure that people who are involved in the industry understand their role. And I think for me, that's something that I try to make sure that I'm a part of the solution. Can I help coaches be more vulnerable and aware of the messaging they're delivering, the mannerisms they have towards kids, so that we can have an exponentially big impact over all the kids in the area? I think that's a big thing for me, when I think about what bothers me.
There's a paradoxical irony in that when you work so hard to be about others, that eventually you yourself become the person people want to be around, and then it does become about you, because it's like, oh, I am bringing a lot of stuff to people. Am I okay with that?
Yeah.
It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. Because you're like, how do I stay humble when I've become the thing everybody wants?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Again, I think it's just being true to who you are is really important. I want to get better to make sure that the coaches that I work with can get better. I want to become better so the players that I work with get better. I want to get better so my friends and family who, I guess, rely on me in certain situations, like I can provide something to them. But yeah, all of it's relationship centered, right? And that's who we are as people. And I think that's why it's so important.
It is. And it's that thing that's bigger than self, right? So what is that thing that's bigger than self in this particular realm? Well, you could loosely chalk it up to the sport, right? It could be soccer. But really it's the relationships. All relationships are bigger than self. They have to be, because they involve two people, not just one. So I think that's really key too. If you were going to say, give some tips or insights to the listening audience on, they're listening, they're like, man, this guy's just so positive and like, he's so humble. Like, how is what people always ask. How do they do that? How do they get there? What do you have to say?
I guess I would say reflecting on all your experiences going through your life. I think we can't help but being humble through all the things that we've gone through. We've made it through, right? So failures and pain and hurt that we've all gone through in life. I think if you reflect back on that and what you've learned through those experiences, I think that's one thing that's really important. And then I just think that just being focused on other people, like what can you do for the person next to you? And when you think like that, I think there's no ways that you can be self-centered, right? You try to do things for other people all the time. And that's what I think this world needs more of: more grace, more love, for your neighbors and the people around you, especially those who are in tough situations. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think people find themselves in a tough position, striking a balance where they give so much of themselves that they forget to take care of themselves sometimes. And that's fine. Like, that's a different conversation. But I think you're right. There's a lot of self-protection going on right now, more so than, it'd be a different problem if we had a whole bunch of people like giving of themselves and serving others. Like, if that was like too problematic, I would love to have that problem than the other one.
Exactly.
It'd be easier to teach boundaries and be like, hey, it's okay to like say no sometimes. But that doesn't seem to be the case. What seems to be the case is people are so withdrawn and they're so anxious about whatever they think they need for themselves that simply turning attention toward others doesn't leave any room for sorrow or misery. It's one of the techniques we use clinically. Is we say, somebody's struggling with depression, say go serve others, go serve some food down at the soup kitchen or whatever. You won't have time to be miserable by yourself. Now, of course, it's complicated by everybody being sheltered.
Yes.
Are you guys experiencing the smoke from the fires? I'm looking out my window right now, and it's day number 7,000 of haze. How is it in the Bay Area?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. We've had some apocalyptic days where it's just been red and the sun is red. Yeah. We had, it also affected our training. We had, I think it was almost 4 weeks where we couldn't be outside because of the air quality. And then we had to go back onto Zooms, which was really, really tough time again. But yeah, it's a bit sporadic at the moment. We'll have 2 weeks of smoke and then we'll be outside for 3 weeks. And now with the glass fires in kind of Napa, again, we've gone through a process of the last week having to be indoors again. So yeah, it's pretty sporadic and really, really tough in that sense, because again, I look at it from the kids' point of view is they were at home through the COVID lockdown for 3 months, and then they're finally out outside, and they look forward to these 3 sessions a week that they get, and then boom, sorry, we're back online.
How do you teach patience and resilience through
that? Focus day by day.
Yeah.
For them, like, what can we do today? What's important today? Getting them to understand, like, what do I get my joy from in this situation? And a lot of them, I guess, especially now with this group I'm referring to specifically as adolescent boys, right? A lot of them will go to the gaming kind of consoles, and that's how they form a distraction. But I guess just opening up those conversations and engaging with them on, like, hey, what can you do today to make sure that you're benefiting from it?
That's a bit of a paradoxical messaging too, because all we've heard is, less screen time, not as much video games. And then it's like, well, sorry, we've taken everything away. So you should probably go get some video game time in, because it's the only way you're going to connect with people. It's like,
yeah, super tough. And then the people that they could connect to in their day-to-day life is also their family, but their family is probably in the same situation where mom and dad are working and they're on Zooms and they're too distracted, and they've been with their kids every single day for the last 5 months and they just want them out, So yeah, it's a challenging time.
Do you have kids?
I don't.
It's been incredibly hard. And I'm talking to the parents out there right now. If you're listening, like, I feel you, man, with a 5-year-old who's in kindergarten in a hybrid learning environment, a wife who's a nurse who works in person at the hospital, but is at home 2 days, but I'm home all days because we were doing all our Zoom stuff through telehealth. We're just now about to return, which is awesome. And so, if you do the math correctly, 2 of those days are me at home trying to do podcasts and client sessions and supervisions with my kids in the background with the dogs screaming at each other. It's like, yeah, it's hard.
So tough.
So hard. And meanwhile, the kids are just like, I just want to go visit my cousins in South Dakota. When is this darn virus going to go away? And every prayer at mealtime is, God, we pray that you take away this virus. It's like, dagger in the heart. Oh, it's so hard to hear kids say that. But I get it. I feel you.
Yeah, Jake, let me throw it back on you.
Sure.
You being exposed to people in my shoes and different coaches in the sporting realm, what are some things that you think are most important for what we do and kind of the people that we're exposed to?
For me, consistency is really important. I am a big fan of authenticity, which is very challenging. I understand it. Like, you got to know who you are to be authentic in the first place. And knowing who you are requires a lot of vulnerability. You touched on vulnerability earlier. Vulnerability just means allowing yourself to receive feedback and change your mind. That's really what vulnerability is. And then through that vulnerability, you can build intimacy, because that's how conversations happen, where people give you feedback. It could be a spouse, it could be a best friend, it could be a coach, it could be your boss, it could be your subordinates. I also retreat to what Christian Conti, who's been a big influence in my life, is a friend, mentor. I mention him as often as I can because he's producing great work. What he has said repeatedly is that you can, and this is very Zen Buddhist, you can get wisdom at any time, anywhere, from anyone or anything, if you're open to it. And that's the key there, is you got to be open to it, and that's the vulnerability. So if you can be vulnerable enough to grow yourself, to know yourself well enough to be authentic, and then apply that authenticity consistently across all venues, what you do end up doing is modeling with intentionality good performance, behavior, attitude, whatnot, for the people who are looking up to you. And that would be your kids, your athletes, your students, your employees. So all that for me weaves together to say, try to be as consistent as possible with as much intent as possible, so that when people see you in different environments, whether it's at the grocery store or at church or in the home or in front of your grandmother or at the fraternity you used to go to, or at work, you're going to be the same person. And I'm not, that sounds probably to the listening audience like, well, you're talking about meeting people where they are. How can you do that if you're being you? What you do is you acknowledge that the fullness of a human being is infinite. We all have infinite capacity. And if we all have the same infinite capacity, what that simply means is that Craig's got capacity that I also have. I may not have recognized it, or I may have recognized something that he hasn't recognized yet. So it's not inauthentic to meet somebody where they are, because what you're doing is you're saying, I believe you can do X, Y, Z. I also believe I am capable of doing X, Y, Z. Maybe one or the other of us has not gotten there yet, but I don't have to pretend that I'm not like you. It's not a faking to meet somebody where they are, because, you know, given different circumstances, we could absolutely be doing what other people do. So for me, consistency is huge, and you want to be authentic, and you want to convey that as often as possible, because then what ends up happening is you build credibility. With consistency comes great credibility. Without it, you don't have any credibility, and then nobody listens to you, and then nobody follows you. So that for me is the biggest component there, I think. Obviously, there's a bunch of tips and technique-y things like understanding emotional functioning is critical to me. Anybody who's listened to this podcast for any length of time knows that I talk a lot about Carol Izard's work and understanding the 10 core emotions that we all have to use to adapt to the environment. So if all human, I go to things that all humans presumably would have, like all humans have the same emotional functioning. We know that from research. So if you could speak that language, you're going to connect with more people. And it takes you out of your own ego. It takes you out of your own zone, such that you're not browbeating people or lecturing them or condescending them. You're just saying, hey, I know sadness, sadness. Sadness is the same among all people. I'll bet you're really in pain right now. And people are like, oh yeah, how do you get me so well? Like, well, it's common among all humans. So yeah, for me, it's the consistency and the authenticity. And then if you're really authentic and you're vulnerable, you make a mistake, there's nowhere to hide. There's no lying that occurs. There's no deviance or sinister nature. You just go, yep, sorry, I blew it. And people see that too, and they go, wow, he's okay with acknowledging that he made a mistake and learning from it. Then you're modeling the behavior that hopefully they also pick up. So
yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question a little bit longer.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome.
Thanks for
great tools there.
Nobody ever asked the host. So, hey, man, I want to be mindful of the time. We're coming up on an hour. Seems like it flew by in a twinkling. You've been awesome. We just scheduled this like in the last 2 days because Safisa was like, hey, I got this buddy of mine. You should totally talk to him. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Anybody, anytime, anywhere. And it just so happened to fit in this morning. But I want to ask all our guests to leave something with the audience, whether it's an exhortation or an invitation or a takeaway or some nugget of wisdom that you want to share. What would you leave us with?
Yeah, I think the same thread that's been throughout this whole conversation is just like, I think we are better people when we look to serve other people. And so I think that's most important, is like, what opportunities do you have in your life to serve others, whether it's your friendships, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's the community you're in, the work environment you're in. I think just this world would be so much of a better place if we just looked to just, I guess, just be there more for people and find ways to help them. And I think that's really important. And I think that a lot of joy can be stemmed from those situations. And, you don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be somebody in your shoes either. You can just be somebody who's present and real and available. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And anybody can do that. Anybody, anywhere. You can be present. And even if you look around, you're like, well, I live by myself. I'm pretty lonely. I'm a little afraid of COVID. I stay inside. Who can I be present for? Be present with yourself.
Yeah.
Be there for you. Meet you where you are. I think that's great. Well stated. Thank you, Craig von Wielligh. Appreciate your time. Well, how can people get a hold of you? How they find you, reach out, whatever? Yeah,
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, I guess more from a professional setting. So it's like @Craig_VW. I'm happy to leave my email address with you as well if anybody ever wants to be in contact. Yeah.
There you are. I see you on Instagram. You're gonna have a new follower. There you go. Requested.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Especially somebody of your caliber. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Jake, thank you for the conversation. I think even just through having conversations like this, whether it's on a podcast or just with somebody else who's willing to listen, I think is really important. Having these kind of conversations helps me to refine the way that I think about things, helps me to kind of find ways to put them into congruent sentences, I guess, for the most part. So I think it's really important.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to do here. I mean, I say repeatedly, this stuff doesn't do any good locked up in my head. So the more people can hear it, better off we'll all be. And that's one